According to Gartner, sales reps report that 20% of stalled and lost deals are a result of overly complex internal policies and procedures. And according to Selling Power magazine, 72% of all new sales opportunities stall in the middle to late stages of the B2B sales pipeline process. Now, they define stalled as a new prospect in a single stage of the sales pipeline process without customer action for more than 60 days. Now, this would be an interesting experiment to test for yourself. Look at those sales opportunities in the middle to late stages of your sales pipeline and ask yourself or your sales reps, what action has this customer taken that demonstrates their desire to partner with us? I think you might find that your sales pipeline has quite a few stalled deals. Now, why is this number so high? Why do 72% of prospects stall in the pipeline? In my opinion, there are several reasons, but perhaps the most common culprit is the lack of a well defined sales pipeline process. Too often, companies implement a sales pipeline process into their organization to match their shiny CRM system without little regard to the core strategic sales activities that sales reps should be completing throughout the entire process. Now, that is just my opinion, but in a moment, I'm hoping that our guest can help shine more of a spotlight on the issue and help us overcome it as well. But first, hello and welcome to the Predictable B2B Success podcast brought to you by Sproutworth.com. I'm Vinay Koshy and our guest is Mark Phinick. Mark, you're an award-winning enterprise software deal coach, pipeline doctor that helps emerging companies land and expand at larger enterprises. In fact, you've had a bit of an entrepreneurial experience yourself. In fact, you've contributed to 7 successful exits. I'm curious, Mark, was there a particular moment in this journey that was a bit of an aha moment that made you go, I really need to help people with the deal aspect of their sales process?
Yeah, thank you, Vinay, and thanks for having me, by the way. So I'll give you a little bit more background. So you touched upon some of the highlights that I've enjoyed in my sales career. I started many years ago when the right thing to do was to go to a early stage startup and then ride the wave with an acquisition or an IPO. So I was very fortunate to participate in 7 exits. Either we sold the companies or went public. That then led to a global sales role at IBM and a global sales role at HCL up through last year when I decided, after seeing deals routinely slip quarter to quarter, sometimes stall indefinitely.
Mm.
And I was seeing this not only from our own organization, but from other large enterprises. And what was fascinating to me is when you're large enough to prioritize EBITDA, you have the luxury of making your numbers based on perhaps renewal numbers or other revenue streams. But I started thinking about my startup days and I started looking at other startups, and most specifically Series B companies that were not getting any more money from venture capital investors, largely because the deals were stalling, not progressing. In other words, they were not executing. So
Mm.
you ask about, was there a moment? Very much in conversations with investors, I realized my superpower, if you will, it's a great term, but my strength and my success comes from helping sellers uncover blind spots and navigate roadblocks and navigate gatekeepers, all in the interest of selling deals faster at a higher value. So what I found quite candidly was there was a need for people like me not to train sellers and coach them on the profession of sellers, but to help them work deals.
Mm. And in this area of your superpower, what would you say is something that businesses don't know but should?
Yeah, I think it's a generational thing. I really do. So I started in this industry, and so it's been 4 decades now.
Mhm.
Yeah, of software sales. And if I look at my peers, we've all been top producers at some of the what are now some of the largest software companies in the world. They were all baby startups when we started. And if I look at my peers, most of them are CEOs. Many of them are VC investors themselves. Others are very happily retired.
Mhm.
And I share this with you because we all went through various sales training programs, experiences that somehow fell to the wayside. And I can cite COVID as a catalyst for this. If I look at people who were trained during COVID, it wasn't on relationship building. It wasn't based on face-to-face sales interaction. It wasn't based on phone calls. It was largely, let's train a bunch of people on how to demonstrate the features and functionality of technology. Let's rely on Zoom. This was just a function of the pandemic. And so what I started seeing was a lack of knowledge, not only on relationship building with clients at the C level, but most notably, how do customers make decisions? How do customers buy enterprise software? It takes a lot of people to buy these technologies. So I think if I were to net out the answer for you, it's stuff that we all learned and have been using for 4 decades, but there's a skills gap.
Mm.
And that's what I'm focused on helping organizations solve.
Okay, and I know that this skills gap is an issue, as is perhaps this idea of stall deals, which is often overlooked. But overall, based on your experiences and success in helping early stage software companies, what would you say is the single most overlooked factor or strategy that, if addressed or implemented, could have a profound impact on revenue growth and the overall success of B2B tech
Yeah.
companies?
So if I were to prioritize,
Mhm.
it's not just one element, but if I were to prioritize, it's categorically speaking the need to translate technology, features, functions, no matter what you're selling.
Mhm.
It could be medical technology, it could be software, it could be hardware. Anytime you're selling to a business, you ultimately have to be able to translate this away from vendor jargon
Mhm.
into the language of the C suite. And what that typically equates to at the end of the day is, how do we increase sales or reduce cost?
Mhm.
There's no line item in the balance sheet for anything other than that. And so having a very compelling business case is paramount to today's enterprise SaaS sales. Now, there's other elements that a senior executive looks at when they're approving or denying a request for funding. And it's important to note that almost all enterprise software today goes up to most senior levels. There's
Mhm.
always an IT board, a security board. Vice presidents typically don't have budgets more than their monthly salary anymore. So everything goes up to the top. And when those people are presented with options of where do we invest our capital, there's a lot of choices. And the question comes down, where am I going to get the highest ROI with the fastest payback period? So business case is absolutely paramount. But they also look for elements that will ensure adoption. So there has to be a technical advocate that's going to be there to
Mhm.
see this through and ensure adoption. There has to be an executive who's going to go get the funding, build a business case, and see it through, lobbying this for adoption. There has to be alignment with all stakeholders, internal and external, including the vendor and integrators and resellers, legal, security operations, infrastructure. Everybody has got to be aligned not only on the justification and acquisition of the solution, but also the implementation, the integration, and ultimately adoption. And then a project plan is becoming more and more requirement, where senior executives are looking for Actions, owners, dates, go live dates, all of these things have to be part of the request.
Mhm.
Nobody wants to buy technology for the sake of technology. They're all doing it with the intent of improving the business. So, one of the biggest challenges in all this is the fact that customers don't buy enterprise software every day. The
Yeah.
evaluators of this technology are they're typically operators, they're directors. They're there to disrupt. Their intent is to disrupt the status quo and increase efficiencies, but they just don't buy software as much as we sell it. So it becomes absolutely imperative for a seller
Mhm.
to empower their sponsors on how to speak the language of the CISO or of the C-suite and help work the mechanics of the organization.
So, if I put this slightly differently, your sales team should be able to articulate a business case that is very relevant to the prospect and also tell a really good story, because ultimately the best story is the one that would help the offer stand out compared to others.
I think executive storytelling is becoming more and more important, but it's your podcast, so I would never tell you you're wrong. Let's agree never to use the word prospect
Okay,
ever again. Nobody would ever like to be called a prospect. I know I wouldn't.
sure.
So I prefer to use the term future client.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think when you're talking about future clients, yeah, I think you're spot on. There's a process that starts and ends with understanding what's important to the client.
Mhm.
Some might think of that as what problem do they want to solve. I would argue that if the future client even knew there was a problem, they could find a solution. They have enough technology, they have enough smart
Mhm.
people. So there has to be an understanding of how to take latent pain, people who know that there's a challenge, but they really don't know that there's a problem we're spending money to solve yet. So there's diagnostic questions, there's discovery questions that a seller must engage a client in.
Mhm.
And it starts with this is an industry that we're familiar with. You're an organization who has problems like those that we've solved in the past. And perhaps we ask provocative questions. How long does it take you to do X? How many people does it take you to do Y? If you had a magic wand, what would you like to accomplish that you can't do in today's environment? And that typically spawns a dialogue where you're able to capture what's important to the customer. From there, we can agree these are the things that are important to you. What are those items that I and my company can help execute on? If I can help you deliver something significantly faster and get it to market, increasing your average revenue per customer, is that something that the business finds appealing? Once you understand what's important, that then helps you understand why the customer would purchase something. And from there, you can then ask who would find it most important. Sales is about questions. Sales is about being curious, much like a detective would. We don't make statements, we ask questions to help an organization accomplish what they can't currently do.
So, with this idea of having a good sales team that really drives the needle, so to speak, I'm curious, what would you say would be the challenges that early stage software companies face when it comes to hiring as well as managing their sales teams?
So let's start with the basic premise of what keeping a CEO or an investor or a chief sales officer, a chief revenue officer up on Sunday nights. What's their Sunday night problem? And the reason that I chose to coach sellers in Series B companies is predominantly there's the most pressure there.
Mhm.
The reality is they've probably already gone through several salespeople, if not several sales leaders. The founder is not a salesperson, shouldn't be expected to know what is required in a sales leader that they hire. So that's a bit of a challenge. And what I found when I launched my coaching business, the biggest challenge that everybody had was that deals were not progressing. So what would happen is sellers would get attention. They ask some great questions. They learn a little bit more. Maybe they even find business problems we're spending money to solve. But they're dealing with a particular level in the business that ultimately has to go to the C-suite for money. The challenge is, and this happens just more and more, the rep gets really excited. We had a great meeting. We had a great discovery session. Oh, we're being asked to do a RFI or an RFP.
Mhm.
And oh, we're being asked to demo our product. That's fantastic. And then we're asked to do a price quote. Now, what I found is when I ask clients, what does your price quote look like? It's typically a brochure or some description of the product and a price. And then what happens? They get ghosted because there's only two times that a future client really needs to speak with a seller, and that's to get a demo or to get a price. And once they have that, there's no need to speak with the seller. The rainmakers that I work with, the people who do this very well and are at the top percentage of their teams, they're working with the clients, showing how to help them improve their business. So it's always the case where those clients want to engage the customer. See, the more that we can help the future customer improve their business, the more we can sit on the same side of the table with them and collaborate
Mhm.
on a mutually agreed upon plan, and then ultimately deliver a outcome-based proposal that senior executives look at and choose. I'm going to get a higher ROI and faster payback period by buying this solution, by investing in this other project. It's not that rare to have a very compelling project steal money away from another funded project. People who focus on is there budget and they focus on BANT, that's the wrong model
Mm.
for 2024. Those who improve the business the most get the money.
Right.
So, long answer to your question, what do you look for in sellers? You look for people who can listen, people who can relate and have empathy
Mhm.
for their future customers' business, those who can translate and those who can connect the dots and
Mm.
translate technology that they sell into business outcomes that will ultimately resonate, if it needs to, the board of directors
Mm.
or investors. Because there's only one language that they speak at that end, and that's money.
Right. So I'd agree with you on that one. I'm curious though, with people who we might refer to as technical evaluators, they often lack the skills to communicate effectively with senior executives. Uh, how do you address the gap in your coaching?
So the irony is for, I don't know, let's just say 100 years. Every sales manager always wants you to call higher. You're not calling high enough. I've done this a long time, and I don't think I've ever met the CEO of a Fortune 50 company. Yes, I've met CIOs and yes, I've met CISOs, but it's usually at the beginning of a sales cycle and at the end of the sales cycle where executives choose to be involved and then they delegate to their evaluators. They're very, very smart people
Mhm.
who know technology. CEOs don't know the acronyms and the functional capabilities of software. That's why they hire very smart IT people
Mhm.
to evaluate technologies. As you've pointed out, these are people who may understand the technology in and out, but they don't buy the software as much as we sell it. So it's absolutely incumbent upon the rainmaker, upon the seller, to empower those individuals based on our own experience doing this hundreds and hundreds of times
Mm.
with other clients. helping them build the business case, helping them align with the other stakeholders, as we talked before, security operations, internal and external resources, helping them put together a project plan. In other words, anticipating what those senior executives in the C-suite are going to ask based on our own experience, and provide a treasure map for the technical evaluator who's probably never done this before, or maybe the processes have changed. What hasn't changed is the business's need to increase productivity and profitability. So, to the extent that we can empower our buyers to focus on those variables, that's how we win.
Hmm. So there's obviously quite a raft of skills that they need to possess in order to do that. I'm curious though, was there could you give us an example of a time where you've actually been able to help a technical evaluator with your coaching? So just to give us a bit of a picture of what it looks like.
Yeah, many times. I'll thank you for that. Those are the stories that old salespeople sit around and tell each other by the fire. I do remember many years ago, I was presenting a piece of technology that uh, it was that integrated different systems, CRM, ERP systems, and it did so very quickly. Our tagline was integration in an hour, where we would take different systems and tie them together. And it was very compelling at the time. And I had got done presenting to a customer, and they said, "That's absolutely fantastic, but your competitor, a very large vendor who will remain nameless, is upstairs negotiating a very large transaction, $10 million transaction, basically to buy what I was selling and a whole lot more." And I paused for a moment. I asked, "Why are you spending that kind of money? Our solution, which provides an exact solution for you, is about $1 million, but you're telling me you're going to spend 10. Why?" "We have a lot of different ERP systems around the globe that we need to integrate." I said, "That's great. Why?" And they responded and explained to me very, politely, "We think if we can tie these different ERP systems together from all these different vendors around the world, we'll be able to get a consistent look at what we're spending with each of our vendors. If we're paying one vendor a particular discount in this country, and that same vendor a different discount in another country, why aren't we getting the same discount as the first one? Why?" And I said, "That's fantastic. What's the impact to the business?" "We think that we can reduce our annual spend by 2% a year." Brilliant. "How much is your annual spend?" $16 billion. At the end of the day, this other vendor is going to provide you with a payback of $320 million. When is that payback expected? It's a 3-year project. That's when we're going to get it. And so I simply asked the question, who in this building would like to see that $320 million this quarter? And so when I picked up my order, I met with the VP of procurement and I said, "Hi, I'm Mark Phinick." And she said, "I know you. You're the person who saved me $9 million. And that individual is now a CIO who I worked with. This was an admin. And I have so many dear friends who are now in senior level roles because myself or the reps that I've coached have focused on empathy and helped them become wildly successful in their roles buying our technology. It's about helping others. It's all about paying it forward. And many of them have achieved upward mobility.
Love it. You highlighted, I think, upon the importance of cash flow, and I wonder if you could elaborate on that a bit more, especially in the context of early stage software companies and how it relates to their ability to achieve revenue growth.
Yeah. So I think everybody in this industry right now, if you're not thinking like an investor, a CEO, you're doing yourself a disservice. I forget who said it, but I want to get the t shirt that says that revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, but cash is king.
Mhm.
I love that. I absolutely love that. And it's absolutely true. The more that you can help an organization accelerate cash flow, that's what
Mm.
matters, right? There's nice to have technology, and then there's need to have technology. And the need to have technology are those projects that are going to accelerate cash, accelerate profits. And there's only two ways you make profit, and that's by increasing revenue and cutting costs.
Yeah.
I know it sounds vulgar and rude just to talk so much about money, but when you're selling multi-million dollar software deals, if it ain't the money, it's the money.
Mm. Mm. Absolutely. Just turning our attention to stalled deals. I mentioned a couple of reasons at the start of the program, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on some of the common reasons why deals stall at critical junctures and what strategies you employ to help organizations
Yeah.
advance these deals.
So it really does tie back to what we've been talking about. The same individuals who I asked, what do you look for when you approve deals? I also asked the same CIOs and senior executives at my customers, and these are global 2000 companies.
Mhm.
So this is the right reference space to ask these questions. Why do you approve certain deals? Why do you decline certain deals? Why do they stall? The largest one is just the seller and therefore the evaluator are still talking in vendor terms.
Mm.
They're talking in acronyms. They're talking about product functionality. They're talking about capabilities of technology. And somebody has to translate that into the language of the C suite. That's precisely what I do with my deal coaching.
Mhm.
The other reasons, as we stated before, is misalignment of resources, internal and externally. There may not be a mutually agreed upon plan with the vendor and integrators and security operations and legal and procurement. This is all work that has to be done before somebody's going to sign off on approving a large enterprise purchase. There has to be a project plan.
Mhm.
There has to be a technical advocate. There has to be a business advocate. And I would say that covers probably 80% of all organizations' processes. There might be other nuances, but that's up to the seller to ask a bunch of different people at their future client
Mm.
who else is going to be involved and why might this not happen as prescribed. What would prevent us from helping you derive the value and the benefits that you're hoping for? When an enterprise SaaS deal stalls, there's a lot of people that suffer.
Mm.
Custom, the future customer, the future client doesn't derive the increased efficiencies that they were expecting. They're still going to deal with the status quo. They want to disrupt the status quo. They want to deliver more with less. But unfortunately, the other side of the coin, if the deal stalls, that vendor's not going to get the revenue needed for the growth that's so required. And unfortunately, some of the startups are at the end of their runway. That means they're not going to get the liquidity. There's going to be some adult conversations that take place. It's look at the numbers. Only one third of Series A companies make it to Series B money. Only one third of Series B companies make it to Series C. These are tough waters
Mhm.
to swim. But if the sellers can figure out how to sell effectively in 2024 and engage the right deal coaching to support sales leaders who should be focusing on strategy and staffing and operations, there's a winning formula.
Mm.
My clients have all sold more with me. One has sold the largest deal that they've ever sold, and two have already been acquired.
If I remember correctly, in our previous conversation, you mentioned five key factors that senior executives in buying organizations look for. Can you provide examples of those and how you've helped your clients meet these criteria effectively?
Yeah, it's the ones we've been talking about: the technical advocate,
Mhm.
the business advocate, the alignment internal and externally. It's a clearly defined business
Yep.
case. It's a project plan, And it's literally translating vendor jargon into the language of the C-suite.
So,
A very compelling business case.
also with language, I'm curious as to how you coach these people. Do you? I can imagine that if it was a Zoom conversation or a teleconference or something of that nature, the call could be recorded and you could review that with the salesperson. But assuming it's a face-to-face type presentation, a pitch, it, it may not be recorded. And I'm curious as to how you would help people work through the use of technical
Oh, great
jargon.
question. So there's a big difference between sales training, sales coaching, and what I do.
Mhm.
So I am very much a deal coach. I help organizations, no matter what methodology they're using, whether it's MEDIC or gap selling or challenger sales or BANT or Sandler or Miller Hyman. There's so many different methodologies that
Yep.
people have standardized on. And the reality is there's only a handful of questions that form the base of these. First and foremost, what does the customer want to accomplish? That's the why.
Mm.
And then it's a matter of who. So in terms of my active selling, I get involved when there's a must-win deal and an organization aligns me with the salespeople on that particular account, and we begin the process of live deal coaching. It may start off with a workshop, an afternoon talking about that particular deal where they tell me everything they know. They'll go home with some homework. I'll ask them some questions. I'll give them some tasks. There's some missing pieces. Think of it as Swiss cheese. They've got the bulk of it. I'm going to
Yeah.
help them fill in the blanks. And then as the deals close, my involvement gets more and more hands on. This past weekend, ironic that you're asking this question. So last Wednesday, one of my clients' reps got into the close zone
Mm.
of a deal. Customer, they had already proven the technology, they had already done reference calls, and the client told them, "Yeah, you're our vendor of choice." We all know that just gets you halfway there. You haven't even begun the real hard work now of helping the evaluator go get the money to do this. So this past Monday.
Mhm.
On Thursday, I worked with the rep and their technical person to make sure we understood exactly what was important to the client. We listed off what was important to the client and that quantified that into increased productivity, increased profitability, increased revenue. There's a lot of different variables that we looked at, but things that the customer shared with us that were important. Sales knows no weekends. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday of this past weekend, I was on call and we did role playing, we did presentations, we did Excel spreadsheets, we put together just a number of actions in anticipation of Monday's meeting, this morning's meeting, where the customer actually gave them the approval to proceed with
Mm.
procurement. Negotiation had been done because we were selling a technology we were providing an exact solution at a mutually agreeable price. We got to that by focusing on what's important, providing the customer with different options that met the needs.
Mhm.
How happy do they want to be and when? And the customer ultimately owned the proposal, right? Because it was their input. And as a result, my client will have that order this week. So we talked about that a little bit, executive storytelling, and I'll extend that to say anecdotes. I love storytelling. I love storytelling. And it's something that your future customers can relate to. And it very much helps understand how your organization has helped has helped other clients just like the one that you're speaking with solve problems just like theirs.
Mm.
The longer you're in the role, the more stories you grab. But there's a number of AI technologies that help even a brand new rep. if they're willing to put the time in to read and practice and role play, perhaps even in front of a mirror to gain the confidence so that the story becomes their own. These are the stories that are easy for a future customer evaluator to understand and then communicate. We're buying the same technology that this other organization in our same industry used to solve these problems. So storytelling becomes very important. It's a key element of what I coach. And it's ironic to see it doesn't matter the maturity of the seller, young and old, they understand stories and they're able to repeat them.
And are there particular methods or tools that you employ when coaching sales teams to incorporate these stories into their sales pitches and conversations?
And there's a million words for it. It's I'm trying to build rainmakers. People have charisma. I wouldn't say it's so much tooling
Hmm.
to do my coaching as it is making sure that what I'm saying is not talking over the audience, but speaking to them.
Hmm.
And then, most importantly, making sure that it's understood.
Right.
So, what I do as part of that effort is we do role playing where I ask them to repeat and use the stories and take on the persona of a rainmaker, take on the persona of sometimes selling much bigger than they actually are. It's wonderful to see sellers reach for reach to do things that they've never done before.
Hmm.
Years ago, I was working with a very young rep, and they were telling me that the future customer that they were working with was not engaging, not responding to their phone calls. I said, "Get in the car, go get on the car." We used to tell everybody, "Wait in the hallway, wait in the lobby," because it wasn't somebody who didn't want to do it anymore, somebody older. They just did it. And he called me from the parking lot. And he said, "Mark, I don't know what to do. It's fantastic. I'm looking in the conference room, and there's my future customer. What should I do?" I said, "Boy, I don't know. Call Domino's and order 10 pizzas and have them delivered. And when they arrive, be there." And it's absolutely true. He called for the pizzas, they got delivered. The receptionist called this individual's cell. He wasn't expected at all, but he said, "Look, they've got pizza for you. They're buying you dinner." He said, "It's the craziest thing I've ever seen." "Sure, send him up." So my rep brought the pizzas up, and he said, "I didn't know how else to get your attention. I hope I'm not overstepping my bounds." He said, "The future customer said, it's the craziest thing I've ever seen. Come on in. Let's all have lunch. Let's all have dinner." And they wound up doing business.
Mm.
So there's lots of ways to bring out the creativity and the charisma and the energy and the passion
Mm.
in sellers. And that's exactly why I do what I'm doing.
So, um, as a seasoned interviewer yourself, what's a question you wish more people would ask you in interviews, and how would you answer it?
I think you've done a brilliant job. I think you've done a brilliant job. I think that the more that sellers can adopt these types of approaches with the interest of helping their clients improve their business, there will be far more clients deriving increased efficiencies,
Mhm.
sellers exceeding their targets, CROs growing the business, CEOs achieving the liquidity that's needed, and investors seeing significant growth and wealth.
Mm.
This is what it comes down to is helping your clients improve their business.
Thanks for that. With regards to stall deals, is there perhaps an aspect or two that you find doesn't get much airtime? If so, what would those be?
What doesn't get the airtime is the hands-on live coaching
Mhm.
of deals. This is precisely why I chose this blue ocean of deal coach versus a very red ocean of chief revenue officers. There's a
Yep.
lot of people who they're just better at it than I. They want to establish go to market programs. They want to establish CRM. They want to do sales stages. They want to do sales kickoff meetings. They want to do forecasts. They want to they're most of the CROs, the best CROs that I know are on their way to CEO land. I don't have those aspirations. So I look to those individuals and I try to convince them where their time is best spent is focusing on strategy for sustainable growth, staffing, operations, and let me help execute the plan that you put forth by coaching the reps doing what I do best.
Mm. Brilliant. This has been very insightful, Mark. I'm curious if people listening want to know more or connect with you, where would you recommend they head to?
Yeah, thank you, Vinay. So I always direct people to my LinkedIn page. My last name is Phinick, Phinick. The first name is Mark. And I do that for a couple reasons. Number one, just a hint, the first time you're talking to somebody, whether it's a future client or an employer or an investor or just a peer, just think 2024, what's the first place that everybody goes to look for you? It's LinkedIn.
Mhm.
And if your LinkedIn page is similar to wearing overalls to your wedding, nothing against overalls, by the way. If that's your style, that's your
Mhm.
style. But if you're dressed shabbily to a formal event, that defines who you are.
Mm.
It's the same thing with your LinkedIn profile. I would encourage everybody this year to up level your LinkedIn profile so that it demonstrates how you help your clients improve their business. That's the only thing that is going to get somebody to want to learn more about you, not what you did 20 years ago, not your title, not your passions and your pets' names. LinkedIn is a powerful tool. And if you use it effectively, you've represented who your company is, who your brand is, who your personal skills are.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with you on that one. Mark, thank you so much for doing this. This has been terrific. We'll include a link to your LinkedIn page as well in the show notes. Thank you again.
Vinay, thank you. Wonderful being with you. Thank you for your time.